clearly we're not going to spoil, the course of the story, but what I can say about it is that part of what makes BioShock worlds feel so rich, I believe, is an attention to, an attention to detail in the world that you experience, and our willingness to tell story with every device we have available to us. So that might be the composition of a scene, what that scene tells you about the world at large, down to, the audio logs are back. They're called gramophone, or they're called voxophones this time. But now, in addition to, all these other storytelling techniques that we used in the first one, mise en scène was another one that played a huge part in the original. That would work in such a way that a room was composed that you could walk into it and look and say, hey, it looks like someone was murdered here and there was an attack, and playing a little bit of detective, you could piece together a small segment of what had transpired just through observation. Now, because the world is not destroyed when you arrive, you can still play archaeologist, but you can also play anthropologist and see events unfolding before you, so you can stop and listen to people. In cases before you actually fight someone, they might not know you're there, and you might skulk around and see what they're actually doing, and find something out about the city. An example would be, again, I mentioned a room where there's a scene of a horrible crime that had transpired in the past. Now you might walk into a room where Vox Populi, who they basically represent, in a way, the sort of underclass of Colombia, with aspirations of their own, have turned the tables on a rich person, and you enter a room and you see the rich person with their serving set and their finest alcohol, serving these very coarse, rude, and angry Vox Populi who are sitting on their furniture with a gun to his head, and that will be the scene you enter. So you can watch this scene, or you can immediately intervene and shoot whoever you like and kick off a fight in the way that you want. So those are like direct storytelling in the game. But in order for all this to work, in order to even begin to build these spaces and to populate these spaces with these scenes and with the gramophone story, it requires that we know something about what happened before too. And I think that helps. And it helps us in cases for continuity between games and books like this, is that there's a sense that the most generic sense that this isn't just a video game where there are boxes and they're only there because we needed to give you something to hide behind, when you're being shot at, but everything is there in order to tell a story. So I would say it's not just reserved for the introduction of the game. What's reserved for the introduction of the game is where you don't have access to your weapon at that point, right? So, but as you saw in Boardwalk, the next level, there's another big hub where it's called Soldiers Field, where families are out enjoying the park at sunset. And in that instance, it's very comparable to the beginning, except you can fight when you want. If you, God forbid, but if you're the kind of player who wants to just push the limits and see what happens under those circumstances, you can. So there will be, throughout the game, there are opportunities to interact with people. If you choose in a nonviolent way, you can just observe them, you can speak to them. And there are a number of different environments, and so there's quite a wide range of people with differing attitudes and perspectives on their place in Colombia that you'll encounter. I think in the intro here, it's important for us to establish the stakes for everyone. So some of it's a little more direct in the beginning, although all the optional storytelling is still there too, the audio logs, the exploratory aspects. And those, what happens I think over time is those also begin to expand in scope. So the levels begin to be structured in ways where there are even more opportunities to go off the beaten path or to choose your path on the beaten path as well. And the other thing is that the game is just very different than BioShock is. I mean, it's a spiritual successor. The fundamental DNA is the same, we say, but it's also very much a new game for us, where we wanted to challenge every one of our own assumptions about what was essential to a BioShock game. So, for example, there's no little sisters, there's no big daddies. There are a number of things that aren't in the game because we decided that's not really to have the BioShock name. The core fundamentals are this world that is, the ability for us to transport you to a place that you've never been, and for it to really cohere and to seem like a really fascinating and interesting place. Like, that's the number one thing that we decided to keep. But so for, in this case, you know who you are. You have a name when you start this time. We're not going to pull the same tricks that we did in the original, where it turns out that, everything you were doing was at the command of someone else, due to the "would you kindly," the Manchurian Candidate catchphrase there. Yeah, I'm not sure how much the specific story there I can give away, because that's very much part of Columbia to see who, he's referred to as Comstock, or Father Comstock, and as you've seen in the demo at least, that he's very highly respected and venerated to the extent that his followers they'll sacrifice their lives at his command, not even to save him, just on his word alone. So now what he's done to command such dedication is part of the discovery. I would say take everything that you've been exposed to so far and come to whatever conclusions you're coming to. That's great to hear. That's very much our thought, that when when people play the game and they interact with Elizabeth and they see, they live her story with her, that the last thing on their mind at the end is going to be the size of her breasts, or and they'll be thinking, it won't even come to mind at that point, right? So that's definitely our hope, and it's great to hear that, and that I'm sure artists would be very happy that you've appreciated their historical detail with the costuming.
And I especially allowed to beach Battleship
Bay.
Yeah. How people
the swimsuits.
Yeah, all the wonderful swimming suits and the music and how the dancing and just the music side.
Yeah, did you notice? Yeah,
I noticed.
That's the one thing I wonder, because there's a lot of American pop music that's being treated, So I don't know, how familiar some of that will be to people. I've heard of that. There's more about that too, I'll say.
Okay.
There's, for people who are interested in following that aspect of the game, there's some discoveries to be made.
Okay, lots of surprises
in the course of the game. Yeah, it will tie into the game. I'll say.